Good afternoon and welcome to our professional development session, Making the Most Out of Objectives. My name is Destiny Jordan.
I'm Jennifer Murphy.
I'm Gail Clutton.
And I'm Kimberly Jones.
Now let's take a look at our agenda for today.
Okay, we will first define the objectives, and then we will take some time and write some objectives, and then we will look at test blueprints.
But before we do any of that, let's hear from Jerry Brooks about one of our favorite topics, PLCs and professional development.
We hope you enjoyed our humorous moment this morning. And now let's move deeper into our topic of objectives. Ms. Jordan.
All right, it's time to define these objectives and what they actually mean.
Okay, so we know that objectives are observable and they must contain action verbs. They're also conditional, which means the conditions of the objective must be stated explicitly.
You also need to make sure as you're writing that your objective demonstrates the mastery clearly, such as 80% of the word list or 70% of math problems solved correctly. Also, make sure that your objective doesn't state an activity, that it is stated as an outcome. An activity is the means to get to the outcome or the objective.
And now one of our favorite parts of PD sessions, games. So we're going to take a moment and we're going to do our first activity using your Chromebook or phone. Log on to Kahoot!, input this PIN number, and let's play a game and see if you can find objectives that are written to meet the 4 criteria that we've stated. Go for it.
All right, next we're moving on to activity number 2, where you will use the standards for your own grade level and write an objective that you would actually use in your own classroom.
Once you've got that objective written, take a look at this flow chart that helps us make sure that we're making it measurable. This is just one flow chart that you might use. It's only 3 steps long, and it's going to help make sure that you're meeting the parameters for a good objective. As you answer each question in each step, it'll tell you whether to go to the next step or whether you're completed.
We have objectives that can be broken down into 3 domains. And we're going to take a real quick second, to look at the 3 different domains that we have available to us as educators as we write them.
The first domain that I would like to mention is the cognitive domain. It involves mental or thought complexities, and it is called for by the objective.
The second one is the affective domain. And in this domain, it relies a lot on the feelings, the emotions, or the values that students may display or have.
The third domain is the psychomotor, and it includes virtually all behaviors.
Our next slide is where we live. And here is a list of some verbs that go along with the different levels.
So on the right-hand side of that slide, you see a taxonomy of educational objectives. And you'll notice at the bottom, the widest part, it says knowledge. That's the lowest level of the cognitive domain and is what you're going to see the most common, especially in elementary school. As you move up from knowledge to comprehension to application, it gets more complex and reaches the highest level of evaluation. You need to make sure that as you write objectives, the level that you're looking at meets the level on that domain.
Now, let's look at activity number 3.
Okay, so on this activity, you're going to use the objective that you wrote in activity 1 and decide which domain that you wrote it in, and then look at the level above and see if the objective that you rewrite the objective to move it up a domain. The whole point of this is, like Gail mentioned, to move up and become more complex.
Next, we're going to take a look at our test blueprint. And here are 4 components to the blueprint. And you'll see in our next slide that we're going to break down each blueprint and see what they look like.
So the purpose of a test blueprint is to help you develop a test that actually measures the objectives that you wanted and covers some different domains at different levels. So the first part of the test blueprint is the content outline. That tells all of the objectives that you taught in the unit, what you were trying to do, and then we'll break that down a little bit further. The next thing is categories. You have to assign categories to your test, so you know that you're addressing all of the different objectives and what they might mean and in what domain. So this one has a couple different ones. They can be anything that you want them to be. The next step is to look at the number of items that you want to put in each category for each objective. You can create a very small test or a very large test, but you need to identify how many in each section so that then you can look at the total number of questions and the percentage each area or each category makes up to come up with a test that designs 100%. This gives you the opportunity to make sure that you've created a test that's at different levels to test all of the different objectives and domains that you've looked at.
Now, taking what you know about a test blueprint, and in your handout, you're also going to find a copy of this story. Use this story, and along with your grade level peers, create a test blueprint about life in Frontier, Alabama. You have your 4 categories. Work together to create the outline, to create the categories, and how many questions you would put in each. And then work that math to calculate your percentages. We're going to give you about a 5, 10, maybe even a little bit longer for some of you to get that finished and talk about it. Was it easy, hard, something you would do all the time? And what do you see as the value for doing this?
Okay, so to end our session today, let's talk about some of the conclusions that we gathered. The first thing we need to do is always begin with the end in mind. We need to know our standards. We need to make sure that our standards align to our objectives so that our outcomes are then measurable. We always need to make sure that we can measure our outcomes. And the last thing that we need to do is to create the assessment and make sure that the assessment aligns to the standards.
Next is our evaluation, and we would first like to thank you all for coming today to our professional development session. But before you leave, we ask that you copy down this link to a Google form, or if you're tech savvy, take a picture with your iPhone or iPad of the QR code to complete our evaluation to help facilitate us with future PD sessions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.